the New Year's Eve party, and the skipper of my cruiser, he says, "Krauss, I want you to meet a friend of mine." And I stood up and got dizzy, and I looked, and I could see 4 stars on his shoulders. It was a lieutenant.
You were sitting at the piano?
I was at the piano.
And they were feeding you drinks?
Feeding me drinks, and at that point I wasn't paying attention to what
you couldn't hold your alcohol.
I didn't pay attention to what, I just kept drinking. This lieutenant general had 4 stars on his shoulder. And I thought, holy smokes, Stilwell was his name, and he was a big one in the East, He was a famous general. So then I quickly sat down after I shook his hand, and then I had my hand on the wall all the way up, and then down the front porch, and I figured I'm going to walk up and down the driveway, but I didn't know it was a circular driveway, so I'd end up in the bushes all the time, And finally, that's the last I remember. And I passed out. And my buddies, they quickly checked my blood pressure and everything, and said they knew I'd passed out. So they took me back to the ship, The only time I ever passed out. And
so then what happened the next day?
Then what happened on the ship, I woke up in the morning, and I'm in this really nice cabin vacated by a four-star full captain, and they put an extra bunk in, and with another ensign. And here's a guy, a lieutenant commander, 2.5 stripes, and she's, "Morning, Krauss," he says. "How'd you like to play for Sunday services?" I looked at him, and I noticed that he was a chaplain, They have a different emblem, not a star, And he had like in the airport, they got you're pulling your stuff, and he had a kind of a little mini organ on there. And I said, "Well, if I get a chance to practice on that organ, sure," he said, "here, you can." And so I started playing, and it was Christmas, and the cruiser originally was supposed to go home, but some idiot in Washington decided we were going to make a show for the nationalists who were fighting the communists over there, and so we had to stay. And the officers were singing Christmas carols, And the kid in my division came and said, "Sir," he says, "Mr. Krauss," he says, "we hear the officers singing these Christmas carols, and we got some of the boys in the division would really like to get in on that." And he said, "We have a piano in the hangar deck?" I said, "Come on." I said, No. He said, "We had 2 Kingfishers, float planes, spotting planes, and the war's over. They took the float planes off. And so I don't know where we got the piano," he said, "but it's in tune, too." He says, "It's a good piano." And I said, "All right, we'll schedule a rehearsal tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock. We'll meet there, And this guy obviously had sung in many choirs all through high school and college and so on. And he picked, he had double tenors and double tenors and basses, 2 tenors and 2 basses.
Mm-hmm.
And in each division, he had a skilled guy, that knew what they were doing. So like at the tenors, the second tenors were off, this guy would take the second tenors in another room and drill them, So by the time we got through, we had a really good sounding men's group, unaccompanied. And they were all, and so
you were a hit, right?
We were a hit. So the guy comes up to me and says, "Sir," he said, "I'm from the ship. There's parked right behind you here." He said, "And could you bring your group over to sing for us?" And I said, "Sure, I'd be glad to." So and that went on ship after ship after ship. It must have about 8 or 10 ships. And by the time we got through, we all gained about 10 pounds because they always got just the best food, the steaks and all that and so forth. But it was the best group I ever had in my life. That's a story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what about in the '60s when you sang at that funeral for, was it Bob Meyer?
Oh, yeah.
Was that his name? Bob Meyer got killed in a car accident?
Meyer, and he was a member of our gang, and it was his funeral home, and there was a seating area, and then in the back, it was like a silo on a farm, perfectly round and high, and so we gathered in a circle, and everybody could hear everybody else.
Yeah.
And everybody was emotional to begin with. And we had David Fernandez with us at that point. Remember that?
Oh, terrific tenor.
Yeah. And gosh, it sounded just great. I couldn't believe we could hear everybody. And
sure.
So I left, and some guy came running up. He said, "Was that your group that just sang in there?" And I says, "Yeah." I said, "One of the guys was, part of our group." And he says, "That's the best men's group I've ever heard in my life." I said, I looked at him. He says, "Listen," he said, "I know what I'm talking about. I'm director of music at Concordia over here and whatnot." Honest. It was the biggest compliment I ever got on music.
Sure.
But he was so excited about that. He thought, it was very good. I could, everybody heard everybody else, and the sound mixed really just beautifully.
Yeah.